Hello and welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm your co-host, Bob Anthony. Good to see you, Eric.
Hi, Bob. Good to see you. And our guest for this edition of Media Watch is one of our longtime favorite guests, Dr. Alan Singer.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you again. Look, I know your primary job is Professor Hofstra, History, Social Studies. You're also a blogger, Huffington Post. What else?
What else? That keeps me busy. Well, one of the things I do, I work with teachers, and one of the things I do is I try to help them to make sense of the world so that they can incorporate it into their teaching. And one of the big things we've been doing the last week, and I blogged about, is the movie Selma. Because
just what we want to talk about.
Right.
How do we use it to teach, and the historical accuracy of it, questions that they may have, and controversy about it. So those are some of the things I've been talking about with teachers.
Okay.
But we've also been using it to talk about some of the past events with the shooting of black men by police officers, trying to kind of couple it all together.
You have been on the show talking about stop and frisk, talking about policing, talking about previous administrations, Giuliani, this administration. So yeah, I guess we can conflate all this discussion because they're sort of germane.
And they're timely. Obviously, everything that you've just mentioned is in the news. All of the historical arc that started, didn't start, continued through the Civil Rights era. And a lot of that is repeating now, and obviously we have the movie. We have, of course, the Oscars at the top of our brains for other reasons.
We'll get into that discussion.
But in any case, welcome. I'm anticipating your take on all of this.
Right. So let's jump right into this whole brouhaha about the historical accuracy of Selma, because I know you've got some points about historical accuracy in film, and we've had that exchange on emails over various movies in the past. But your take on the job that director Ava DuVernay did on Selma, as far as one telling the essence of that story, and then how close to historically accurate.
Okay, a lot of the big controversy is on her portrayal of Lyndon Johnson, and I actually had no problems with how she portrayed him. Lyndon Johnson was a notorious potty mouth. He had no problems cursing, and he used racial epithets. Lyndon Johnson was also a politician, and it's clearly on the record that he was willing to trade off black rights. In '64, at the Democratic Convention, Lyndon Johnson basically denies the Mississippi Freedom Democrats the ability to represent the people of Mississippi at the convention, and he doesn't want to jeopardize his election. So where it was to his interest, his political advantage, he was prepared to compromise issues for blacks. Yeah. On the other hand, he is credited. He does initiate the Voting Rights Act. He initiates the Civil Rights Act. Yeah. He may have been the last liberal president that the United States has had and will have in the foreseeable future.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I don't have trouble with how he's portrayed.
Here, you know what? As a filmmaker myself, I give her great points for how she handled that story and how well she dealt with it. And it's historical accuracy, pretty much. Now, I understand that Lyndon Johnson was not the president who actually sicked J. Edgar Hoover and the Justice Department on Dr. King and the movement.
That was Kennedys.
That was John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert F. Kennedy.
Right.
And a lot of liberals don't like to hear that. They don't want to deal with it.
I know, but it was definitely politically expedient for the Kennedys to do so.
Yeah, no, there was no two ways about it. And I'm sure, smart as she is, Ava knew it wasn't LBJ, it wasn't. But as she has pointed out in any number of interviews, she was not doing a documentary. She was doing her version of what that whole Selma part of the civil rights movement was all about, and what actually led up to that whole Selma movement. And so for her to tell it in her interpretation, I have no problem. It wasn't a documentary. It was an artistic interpretation of the times. You can talk a little bit about some of those other artistic license that other directors have taken in history. For example,
Mississippi Burning, Mississippi Burning, where the FBI supposedly goes in and cleans up the mess, where the FBI stayed out of it,
or
and,
were infiltrators in the Klan,
Right.
egging the Klan on.
and knew
That's
what the Klan was
historical
doing,
accuracy.
and they did not protect
Right.
these guys.
So, but that didn't come out in that
No.
movie.
And the thing is, Mississippi Burning was a very powerful movie, and that one of the problems with Selma, it's not a powerful movie in many ways, and part of it's very talky.
Okay.
You sit because it's all focused on King's speeches and strategies, and a lot of the drama that could have been included in the movie isn't there because King wasn't involved. There's a problem with just focusing on King. In Eyes on the Prize, two of the most powerful messages from Selma are interviews with this young girl, Cheyenne Webb, who was 8 years old at the time. Cheyenne Webb is on the march, the first march where the police attacked the marchers. And in an interview in Eyes on the Prize, she recounts how after the tear gas, she starts to run. And Hosea Williams picks her up bodily. She's an 8-year-old girl, is running across the bridge with her, and she's kicking and screaming, "Put me down, you're not running fast enough."
Okay.
And that's not in the movie, because that's not King.
Right.
Bob, did you see Selma?
No, I did not.
Ah,
There's
okay.
a screening coming up, which
All right.
I'm pretty much lined up for.
I don't want to spoil it for you because there are parts of Eyes on the Prize that I did not see in the full arc of that, so I missed that interview.
Yeah.
So for me, not seeing that in the movie Selma didn't bother me.
Okay.
But the power of her vision, for me, is encapsulated in the opening of the movie. You cannot get a more powerful opening with a more poignant and riveting statement than the way this movie opens.
Okay.
So I'm not going to tell you.
All right.
So
No, I'll be there in front of the screen,
but
soaking that in.
within the arc of cinematography,
Okay.
within the arc of personalizing that story, and yes, it does focus on King's personal life a lot more than the others, but he does bring in that camaraderie between King and his lieutenants. So you get to see them and know them as human beings, not just iconic figures.
And that's what gets
so-
lost in a lot of other renditions I've seen of his life. You don't see the casual give and take. Jesse Jackson talks about that sometimes. The hotel room give and take, the background before the big speeches, and just the casual chatter before a big event. And you don't. I mean, I anticipate seeing that, but you don't get that in a lot of what other things.
That's here.
That personal
Okay.
comradeship, she captures that beautifully.
Okay.
She does not shy away from dealing with the flaws and foibles of Dr. King and his personal relationship in his life.
And that's
And I'm trying to say, what I loved was how subtly and yet bluntly she handled it.
Okay.
And I looked at that as a filmmaker and went, you know what? It would take a female director to be able to actually handle that well
Okay.
and still give you the truth.
She doesn't
It's-
put it at the center.
No, it's not the
it's a
center,
flaw.
but
Okay.
it's major to his relationship with his wife.
Yeah,
And so it's crucial. And boy, it's beautifully done. I got to tell you, this is a movie, a must-see movie. For
Yes.
real.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
a must-see movie.
Even when you disagree with it, you got to see it to be part of it.
yeah,
But
yeah.
there's one other thing she left out that in Cheyenne has, and again, for teaching stories, it's important. One of the things we do with teaching is we actually act out the script from Eyes on the Prize.
That's why you
But-
need documentaries.
Yes, that's why. But right after, as the marchers retreat to the church, they retreat to the church. It's the Brown Chapel AME, and they're feeling defeated because they've been beaten. And Cheyenne tells the story, and someone starts to hum, "Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around" in the church. And what happens is it builds to a crescendo until it becomes not a mourning sign, but a sign of their triumph and their power, because they had been beaten, but they had not surrendered.
Yep.
And I think that, again, I wish she put it in the movie, but King wasn't there, and that's a problem with a bio flick. But
Well, it's interesting because she didn't call that film King. She called that
Selma.
film Selma. And that's because that Edmund Pettus Bridge is really the focal point of, it's beautiful the way you get the shots of that bridge. Okay.
Right.
See?
maybe the bridge should have got a nomination as Best Supporting Actor.
Hey, what can I
Possibly.
tell you? But my point is, it's not King. But let's
It's
talk
King of
about
Selma.
Yeah, you got it. But in that discussion on how you bait and switch, I call it bait and switch because for me, when Spielberg did Lincoln,
Yeah.
and we've exchanged stuff on that.
Yeah.
Did you see Lincoln, Bob?
No, I did not. Not his rendition. No.
Oh, okay. The title of that movie, Lincoln, would make you
Sure.
think it'd be like King, right?
Yeah.
That's a biopic about the president of the United States who did what he needed to do during the Civil War and got assassinated. Well, actually, the title of that movie should have been The Passage of the 13th Amendment. As seen through the eyes of Steven
Right.
Spielberg.
Right.
Or maybe 3 months.
Right. Exactly.
Both movies had that problem. They focus on 3 months.
Yeah.
And you don't get to see what happened before, what happened after.
And
Yeah.
see, I have a big problem with that because my degree is in history and focused on American history. And I've read a lot of the writings of Ulysses Grant and Lincoln, and not then, but now I've read some of Lyndon Johnson's writings and tapes. And it gets me mad when stuff like that is left out, when you don't have the right context and someone's chopping a narrow time period, focusing on that and presenting it as a major documentary on a whole era.
But he didn't present it as a documentary, and that's why
Okay.
I gave him an A for movie making
Okay.
of a political insider's drama on how Washington politics got done in the 19th century.
Okay.
He did a great job on that.
All right.
Telling the real story of how the 13th Amendment actually got passed, he got an F.
Okay.
Because guess what? He had nothing to dealing with any of those black political figures who were pressuring Lincoln. Frederick Douglass mainly, but a bunch of other folk, all kinds of regional and local agitation in the streets that was dealing with, we've got to get this stuff taken care of. None of that was in the movie.
Oh.
So now,
There was something
historical
else.
accuracy? You may also have some other historical
no,
accuracy
something else
that
was
they
worse.
missed.
Lincoln wanted to accept the Southern Confederates back without any penalty. The reason he was pushing it so fast, and it had to be done before the new Congress, 'cause he wanted to allow the South back in without any penalty, without any reservation. So he had to change the Constitution before he let him in. But Lincoln's push to have charity towards all the Southerners, what ends up creating 100 years of Jim Crow.
Oh, yeah.
That doesn't appear in the movie.
That's historical accuracy that got shoved aside for artistic license.
Right.
So we have this discussion
Sure.
because I was talking about the power of these images and how it influences people, and so when an auteur or director decides he's going to tell a story just because he has a vision, it has phenomenal impact. David's film is going to have phenomenal impact, but I think it's going to have phenomenal positive impact. One of the worst films as far as impact that's ever been perpetrated on this country is one of the earliest films, Birth of a Nation.
Now, see,
Birth of a Nation set the tone, fostered the Ku Klux Klan, did all kinds of things about perpetuating and perpetrating all kinds of negative, stereotypical images of black people in this country that people still live by today.
Right.
And that goes back to that film. So talk to me about film and historical accuracy. There was nothing historically accurate about Birth of a Nation.
No, but
they get all kinds of praises about what a great filmmaker D.W. Griffith was.
I saw that in a history class at Columbia, James Shenton at Columbia, and the room was packed. It was a special screening for the history class, and some other classes were in it. I remember the look of so many people just aghast because they knew it was a D.W. Griffith spectacular. They were going to check out the movie making ability,
yeah.
the shooting, the angles.
This man's
That's
reputation,
art.
his reputation is so great.
They were expected to be awestruck by that, but they were awestruck, obviously, by the
content.
It's like the Nazi films from the 30s.
Yes.
Great art, horrendous stories.
I was personally flattened because I'm a early movie buff. I like those old silents, and when I saw it for the first time in the class, I was like, oh my God.
Yes.
This is what they believe.
And they cheered in New York when it premiered.
Yes.
They
that's my
showed it at
point.
the White House
Yeah,
because Woodrow Wilson was a Southerner who was an open racist. And those kind of things have been erased from history.
Yeah, we could talk about artistic license versus historical accuracy and run out of time on this.
Sure.
But
Sure.
you've got some other points you need to make.
The other thing that was missing from the movie, again, because it's the 3 months, it's basically January through March, is it portrays Selma as triumphant. We got the Voting Rights Act, but there were some real issues here that Selma wasn't a triumph. In some ways, it was the eclipse of the civil rights movement. What happens at Selma is really white liberals declare that the civil rights movement is over because it won with the Voting Rights Act, and they pull back from the coalition. In the meantime, in the urban black communities, people are seeing very little change taking place in their lives. So in '65, right after the Voting Rights Act is signed, it's like a week later, there are riots break out in Watts because change did not take place. That part of the story is left out. In '67, King gives a speech at the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. That is it's one of these Parisian speeches predicting the future, and he says, I wrote down the quote. We all struggle, and all the achievements we must face the fact, however, that the Negro still lives in the basement of the great society. He is still at the bottom, despite the few have penetrated to slightly higher levels. Even where the door has been forced partially open, mobility for the Negro is still sharply restricted. Even where there is often no bottom at which to start, when there is almost no room at the top. In the consequence, Negroes are still impoverished aliens in an affluent society. I mean, if King was alive today, he could give the exact same speech.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. But here's why I say that her artistic license in presenting Selma as a triumph works. And I know it works for her, and it works for the audiences who see the film.
And for Oprah, too.
Oh, yeah, no. And we know that the '65 riots are coming. That's another whole story, another whole chapter. We know that. But here's what people really need to focus on. Johnson was hoping there'd be no problems when this happened, and the worst nightmare occurred. White female Viola Liuzzo from Wisconsin, somewhere in the north, came down to help, murdered. James Rabb, minister from Boston,
Murdered.
white, comes down to help, murdered. Now, what that does on national television, all those cops beating and all that stuff, galvanized this entire country into saying, this is not us. This has to stop.
Yeah.
And guess what? If you got the country to do that by that bridge in that incident, that's a triumph. Now, we know it's only a step on the road triumph. And we still have a long way to go, because guess what? It's 2015 and we're still marching this road. But she has every artistic license right in my book to portray that as a triumph.
I don't have disagreements with her artistic license. It's just that as an historian, but as a teacher, teachers are taking kids to see this, and I'm saying, would I rather them see this, or would I rather them see the Ice on a Prize segment?
Oh well, yeah, and that's the documentary. That's my point.
That's right.
The documentary
as a documentarian,
is artistic.
Right.
As a documentarian, I have to make the best, most artistic documentary I can. But it has to be factually accurate.
Right, but you still need people to sit in front of it. You
That's
still
right.
you still
Yes.
need to attract
That's
the
exactly
audience,
right.
and that's always the issue with any kind of
Look,
recording.
12 Years a Slave.
Right.
PBS did a documentary version of the Selma Northup story in like 1980 with Avery Brooks.
No, that
I
was a
love
film.
it.
That was a film. It wasn't a documentary.
Oh,
that was another
okay.
artistic
Okay.
interpretation.
It was really
that was
good.
Gordon Parks' interpretation.
But they couldn't get an audience for it.
Well, it came
Yeah.
out of a Texas station. I don't think it came from one of the big flagship stations. It wasn't GBH. It wasn't NET.
Is that
it
what
wasn't
happened?
KCET.
But it was very good.
It was excellent. It was an excellent version of 12 Years a Slave.
His name wasn't enough to.
Gordon Parks' name was not enough.
No.
Avery Brooks' name was not enough.
No.
It was barely.
You needed Brad Pitt and Oprah to get there.
Exactly right. Plan
Amazing.
B.
Right.
Guess who was behind 12 Years a Slave?
Brad
Plan
Pitt.
B.
Right.
Guess who was also on board for Oprah and Selma?
Okay.
Plan B. So my thing, what we have discussed, when people take artistic license on making films and doing stuff like that, they tell that story from their perspective.
Yes.
My thing on Steven Spielberg, I hate to keep beating up on Steven Spielberg, but when he took Amistad and made a movie he called Amistad, which for me, from my historical background and perspective, is a slave revolt at sea,
Yeah.
where Sing Q pulls together his guys on that ship, and against all kinds of insurmountable odds, they overthrow these slavers.
And they're 4 minutes of the movie.
Guess what? Steven Spielberg put it in like 2.5 minutes of the opening of the movie, and the rest of the movie is a damn backroom courtroom drama where these heroic figures are now reduced to supplicants pleading for some white savior like John Quincy Adams to save them in a courtroom. What kind of Amistad is that?
Okay.
He gets an F for bad movie making
Okay.
and a double F for bad history. Okay,
Okay.
so they need to stop
But I
beating
got
up on. Need to stop beating up on Ava DuVernay.
Okay.
Her history was 99% correct.
Okay.
In classrooms, those are the 4 minutes that we show because they show the horrors of the transatlantic slave trade.
Interesting.
But the rest of the movie is not worth
It's
watching.
useless for
It's a useless movie.
Okay.
And guess what? That little revolt thing is shot so darkly, with so little communication between these guys, you don't even understand what the odds are that they're overcoming.
Yeah.
It's like 4 minutes of what did I just see in the dark?
Right. Okay.
Bad movie making for what's a really heroic kind of incident.
But we read it along with Equiano.
Okay.
And
Tell our listeners.
Equiano Udalo is a African Igbo who was kidnapped as a kid, and he survives the transatlantic slave trade. He later writes his memoir. He's actually a leader in the campaign to end the transatlantic slave trade in England in the 1790s, writes his biography. So what we could do is you can look at the clip and you can read his story. And that helps the students, high school students, to visualize the world that he is talking about.
Yeah. We can stop beating up on Spielberg, and we can
Sure.
stop talking about historicity. There are a couple of other issues that you normally talk about when we get here.
Yeah,
Let's
we have
segue.
about 5.5 minutes.
Oh,
Sure.
let's segue.
Okay, well, this is the thing. I wrote this. But in Brooklyn, you don't have any street creds unless you can rap. Now, the high school kids in Brooklyn, they call me Reese's Pieces.
Okay.
And they call me Reese's Pieces because I'm better than Eminem.
Yeah, right.
Okay. All right.
But so
I can follow the logic.
what I did is I took Glory by Common and John Legend,
That's
and I
the
kind of redid
theme.
it.
That's the theme from Selma, folk. Because
Yeah.
if you haven't seen the movie, it's not going to resonate with you. But
They're
go.
really good. I'm really bad, but I'm not bad in the street sense. I'm bad in the more traditional sense.
Okay.
But I'm going
Yes.
to do my revised version, which makes my political point.
Okay.
Now, before I could do my rap, I have to put my rap hat on. It has to be the right angle.
Yes.
So this is Reese's Pieces, and again, I apologize to Common particularly because I'm not going to be good.
Okay.
So some of the lines are his, I kind of sample, and some of the lines are
We'll
mine.
reinterpret
All
it.
right, so
Artistic
hands to the
license.
heavens, don't shoot, can't breathe, our glory not destined. Every day women and men are sacrificed, sins that go against our skin still continue. The movement's out of rhythm for us, freedom in the distance for us, justice still denied for us, justice for all still a dream for us. Many sons die, their spirits revisiting us, defiant living in us. Resistance is us. That's why Selma marched as a wake-up. That's why we walk through America with our hands up. Who is going to man and woman up? Society says stay down, but we stand up. Most cups empty, but some have a full cup. Which way's the mountain? We're still not up. Can't wait till the glory comes. Justice for all, justice for all. Can't wait till the war is won. Jobs and justice is a cause. 'Cause the war's not over. Selma's fight ain't won. Our struggle's not finished. It may never be done. Don't cry glory, oh glory. There's no glory, oh glory, 'cause Selma's fight ain't won.
All right, that's a good reinterpretation of Common and Glory. So,
But
but
the
you're
fight
right.
ain't won.
Yeah.
The fight is still continuing, and the interesting thing. Let's segue to that whole bit about hands up and kids and young men and even young women dying at the hands of law enforcement. And I say law enforcement because when I was talking last show with Kevin McGrew, the corrections officer. He said there is this mentality of siege where these folks want to get home because a lot of them are, feel that they're under siege. Our communities know we're under siege. These cops walking the beat, black, white, whomever behind that blue uniform, most of them tend to be in a siege mentality themselves. So what are we going to do about the fact that you get somebody that's supposed to be representing the Patrolmen's Benevolent Association screaming that the mayor of the city of New York is responsible for 2 cops sitting in their car being slain by a deranged man, and that he says blood is on the mayor's hands, when the mayor's trying to say you need to be accountable for how you treat these citizens?
As a teacher, they expect teachers to be accountable for the performance of the kids. Cops have to be accountable for what they do. You can't, and again, police officers are trained to shoot to kill. They shoot for the chest, for the heart. That's their training, and they're giving weapons that are deadly weapons. And we have to figure out a way to have the police and the communities on the same side. And right now, they're too much of an occupying army.
Yeah, my phrase, yes, occupying force. Now, our local New York police cars have
CPR.
CPR.
Yes.
C stands for
Courtesy.
courtesy. P stands for protect,
Professionalism.
and R stands for respect. My community doesn't seem to get any courtesy, very little professionalism, and no respect from the New York City Police Department. I mean, why do we have that painted on the side of these cars?
I mean, I think we missed our moment. There was a moment where, imagine if Patrick Lynch had said, I know that this idiot from Baltimore had nothing to do with it, but we still need to do something about my cops. So we need to talk about this. At least it would have been the beginning of a dialogue, and at least we would have been reaching some kind of consensus. And we have about 50 seconds left, so we need to wrap up. But we missed a moment.
Yeah, well, I would like them to read the side of their cars and try to put that into practice. I mean, if they tried to do that, maybe there'd be a much better rapport between them and the community, because I'm not seeing it coming at us.
And we have about 30 seconds.
The problem's not just the police, unfortunately. It's the whole tone in our society. That you have people in our society are criminalized. In New York City high schools, you have kids go through metal detectors and security that is tighter.
Another whole issue. Another whole issue. Okay. All right, folks. Been Media Watch, Eric Tait with Dr. Alan Singer.
And Bob Anthony.
And
we'll catch you the next time. EVT Educational Productions and MNN.